Hi, I'm Colin Kirk and you're at Queen's Botanical Garden, specifically in the Rose Garden. We practice organic and sustainable rose gardening, which can be quite difficult, but this rose garden was started between 12 and 15 years ago. We probably have between 60 and 75 plants within the rose garden in varying colors between the red you see here and the pink magenta to our back, as well as white, yellow, orange, and peach. We have a very unique rose garden here in that we only practice sustainable gardening. We don't spray or use any types of pesticides or herbicides while managing the roses. We do apply an organic fertilizer once a year. After their first bloom, we deadhead to encourage another bloom. And then we just continue to weed by hand underneath the roses throughout the season. The blooms all depend on how mild of a winter we had. We're actually 2 to 3 weeks earlier than we were last year, and as you'll see here today, which is May 26th, we're really starting to see them finally blossom. Usually we'll see a second bloom in July or August. We'll keep deadheading them, and last year I saw rose blossoms all the way to Thanksgiving. I'd like to introduce you to some of our roses. Right here is a McGrady medium red climbing rose. This was developed, or bred rather, back in the 70s. It's one of the few true red roses we have in our garden. Most of our roses tend to be softer pastels, whites, and cream color. This rose is great. It's a very good performer. If you continue to deadhead it, this rose will continue to bloom into the fall. People really love this one. It's very classic. When we talk about sustainable rose practices, we have a higher tolerance for imperfection than one would have in kind of chemically controlled rose gardening. So right in here, you're witnessing black leaf spot, which is a disease. And typically, if you were cutting these flowers for bouquets, you couldn't sell anything with this black spot. But here at the garden, we're just favoring the rose itself. And, otherwise, this rose is very healthy. Here you're looking at a home run rose, which is a descendant of the knockout roses, a very popular and classic rose. It's a shrub rose, which does very well in New York's climate, as you can tell by the numerous blossoms and the size of it. This rose is a good example of kind of the struggles we faced this year with COVID-19. I wasn't able to prune it as much as I'd like in the winter because it was only me tending to this garden. So we have a very big, massive knockout rose, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. This is one of our white Floribunda roses. It was the first to bloom in the garden this year. It has a nice fragrance and 5 to 7 blooms on each stem. We have a cascading kind of color wheel in our roses, and by design, it goes from white over to yellows and creams to magenta and red over to our purples and violets, and then back over to our oranges. It's a very nice design. All roses are on, or at least when they were installed, about 12-foot raised beds in ground. And over time, those beds have kind of sunk. And so one of our projects in the coming years is to re-raise these beds and remove these roses when they're dormant in the winter. This is a Rosa Roseanna. It's a climbing rose developed by Cords, which is a German company that typically specializes in Floribundas. Cords as a breeder does very well in the New York climate. We have the same summers and winters. If you think about how we produce a lot of Rieslings out in Long Island, which is a wine varietal that developed a lot in Germany, then you can kind of think about how their roses would do very well here. Nice fragrance, huge blooms, single bloom, great cut flower. This isn't even in its peak bloom. If you look hard enough, you can see a bunch of buds. This is definitely a showstopper at the garden, mostly because people can walk right below it and have roses over their heads.